I never thought I'd take a job like this. When the listing popped up, a caretaker position for an abandoned property, I figured it was just the kind of quiet, easy work I needed. No fancy interviews, no stressful hours. Just a remote house, some basic upkeep, and enough money to keep me afloat. I was tired of the usual grind, tired of the noise and the crowds. This job sounded perfect. But the moment I arrived, I realized something was very wrong. The property wasn't just abandoned. It was frozen in time. Like someone had walked away in a hurry, leaving everything exactly as it was decades ago. The gate was rusted shut, the driveway cracked with weeds pushing through the concrete. The house itself loomed like a forgotten relic staring back at me through shattered windows. There was this heavy silence all around, the kind that fills your ears and presses against your chest like an invisible weight. I remember the first time I pushed open the creaky front door. I was expecting dust and cobwebs, maybe some broken furniture. But instead, everything felt oddly preserved. The air inside was thick and stale, but there was a faint smell too. Something like old paper mixed with a faint metallic scent that I couldn't place. It felt almost like the house was waiting for me to arrive. Waiting for something. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet, and the walls seemed to close in just a little. The silence was almost deafening. That's when the questions started swirling in my mind. Why had the owners left? Why had the last caretaker disappeared without a trace? Why was this place untouched for so long, as if frozen in time? I told myself to shake off the feeling, that it was just nerves playing tricks on me. After all, I needed the job. The pay was good, and the seclusion was exactly what I wanted. No interruptions, no city noise, just me and the house. But even as I unpacked my things, I couldn't ignore the faint creaks and whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. It was like the house was alive, breathing around me. The first night was the hardest. Darkness settled in like a thick blanket, but it wasn't comforting, it was oppressive. Every small sound became a giant threat. The wind brushing past broken windows, the groan of old wood settling. But then there were sounds I couldn't explain, soft footsteps upstairs when I was alone, the sudden drop in temperature in one room that sent chills racing down my spine. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I caught myself holding my breath more than once. I kept telling myself it was all in my head. That this place had stories, urban legends, maybe, but nothing real. Still, deep down, a knot of unease was growing tighter every hour. Was I really alone here? Or was something else waiting in the shadows? I'll be honest, part of me wanted to leave right then. But I had committed. This job was my lifeline, and I had to see it through. That's when I decided to dig deeper, to understand what secrets this house held. What I found didn't just scare me. It changed everything. The drive to the property was long and lonely. I left the city early, hoping to beat the heat and the traffic. The closer I got, the quieter it became. The paved roads turned into gravel, and then into dirt paths surrounded by thick woods that swallowed the sky. My phone's signal dropped somewhere around the halfway point, and I knew I wouldn't be able to call anyone once I was there. The sun was beginning to dip when I finally caught sight of the house. At first, it looked like just another old farmhouse, something you'd expect to see in a history book. But as I pulled closer, the details became clearer: peeling paint, broken shutters swinging on rusty hinges, and the heavy scent of damp earth mixed with decay. The yard was overgrown, wild grass and thorny bushes choking what had once been a neat garden. I parked near the gate, but it was locked tight with a chain and padlock rusted solid from years of neglect. I found a side entrance, a narrow path partly hidden by brush. The closer I got, the more the air felt heavier, like the whole place was holding its breath. It was the kind of silence that presses in on you, making every little noise stand out like a scream. The front porch creaked under my weight as I stepped onto it. The door didn't budge at first, but after a firm shove, it swung open with a groan that echoed through the empty rooms. Inside, the dust was thick, dancing in the slivers of fading sunlight sneaking past boarded windows. Everything was coated in a fine layer of neglect, but surprisingly, there was no sign of animals or pests. No birds nesting in the rafters, no rats scurrying away. The house felt hollow. The walls seemed to absorb sound rather than reflect it. When I called out, my voice came back at me, distant and strange. I started to explore, my footsteps soft on the creaking floorboards. The furniture was draped in dusty sheets, the wallpaper peeling in long strips. Old newspapers lay scattered on the floor, their yellowed pages telling stories frozen decades ago. As I walked through the rooms, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. Sometimes, when I glanced at a corner or down a hallway, I thought I saw movement, shadows flickering just out of sight. But every time I turned, there was nothing. I set about my first task, checking the plumbing and electricity. The wiring was ancient and frayed, but surprisingly, the generator in the basement still hummed quietly. Water pressure was weak, but running. I couldn't tell if it was a relief or another strange sign that someone had kept this place barely alive. The sun disappeared completely, leaving the house to swallow me in darkness. I lit a few candles I'd brought along and sat down in the living room, trying to settle my nerves. That's when I heard it, the softest whisper, barely audible, like a breath against my ear. I froze, heart hammering, scanning the shadows. Nothing. Over the next few hours, the quiet was punctuated by strange sounds, tapping, scraping, and the occasional creak of wood. Once, I heard what sounded like footsteps pacing the upper floor. I told myself it was the house settling, or maybe a raccoon or some other animal. But the footsteps didn't stop, didn't wander away, they circled back and forth in a pattern, as if someone was pacing, trapped. I found myself drawn to the window overlooking the backyard. The moon was out, pale and cold, casting long shadows that twisted through the trees. I thought I saw a figure standing just beyond the tree line, but when I blinked, it was gone. Despite the fear crawling under my skin, I couldn't tear myself away. There was something about this place, something buried deep in its bones. It was like the house was trying to tell me something. And I needed to listen. The first few days were a strange mix of routine and rising dread. I kept busy with small tasks, cleaning cobwebs, checking the windows, fixing creaky doors, but the unease never left me. It was like the house was watching, waiting for me to slip up or reveal something. At night, things changed. The first night, I thought I was imagining it, the faint tapping on the walls, like someone lightly drumming their fingers. I would stop and listen, heart pounding, but it always stopped when I tried to focus. It was almost teasing me, playing games I couldn't understand. Then came the whispers. They were so soft I wasn't sure if they were real. Sometimes just fragments of words, like someone calling a name, my name, just out of reach. I'd snap my head around, searching for the source, but all I'd find was empty air. One night, the temperature dropped suddenly in the room where I was sleeping. The air became icy cold, and my breath fogged in front of me. I wrapped myself tighter in the blanket, but the chill seemed to creep into my bones. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl, coming from the hallway outside my door. I grabbed my flashlight and flung the door open, shining the beam down the dark corridor. Nothing. Just shadows dancing on cracked wallpaper. I began to feel the isolation more deeply. No phone signal, no neighbors for miles, just me and this house with its growing collection of secrets. I started keeping a journal, scribbling down everything that happened, every strange sound and sight. Maybe writing it down would make it less real. Or at least help me remember everything clearly. One afternoon, while exploring the basement, I found something I wasn't expecting, a small, locked wooden box hidden behind some old crates. It was dusty and old, but the lock was surprisingly new. My hands trembled as I pried it open with a screwdriver I'd brought. Inside were a few faded photographs and a stack of yellowed letters. The pictures showed the house in its prime, a family smiling on the porch, children playing in the yard. But the letters told a darker story, messages filled with fear and desperation, written by someone who felt trapped, watched, and haunted by something in the house. That discovery made my skin crawl. It was clear that the previous occupants hadn't left by choice. Something forced them out, or worse. That night, the haunting escalated. I was woken by a sudden loud bang coming from upstairs, like a heavy object crashing to the floor. My heart slammed in my chest as I grabbed my flashlight and crept up the stairs, trying to stay as quiet as possible. At the top, the hallway was empty. But the air felt thick, and a cold draft brushed past me like a breath from nowhere. I noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of the hall, the door to a room I hadn't explored yet. I pushed it open slowly. Inside was an old nursery, faded toys scattered across the floor. The air here was heavier, almost suffocating. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper covered in faint, childlike drawings. And then I saw it, a small rocking chair moving slowly back and forth, though no breeze stirred the room. My skin prickled with terror. I didn't want to stay, but something pulled me in. Suddenly, a soft whisper floated through the room, clearer than before, a child's voice saying, "Don't leave me." I stumbled back, heart racing. I knew then that whatever was in this house, it wasn't just shadows or my imagination. It was something trapped, something desperate. I spent the next few days watching, listening, trying to piece together what this place wanted from me. The house seemed alive, shifting with the day and night, its presence growing stronger. At times, I'd catch glimpses of shapes just beyond my vision, flickers of movement in dark corners. One evening, as I sat near the fireplace, I noticed the flames flickering unnaturally, casting twisted shapes on the walls. I could swear I saw a face, anguished, pleading, emerge from the shadows, only to vanish when I blinked. The tension was unbearable, and sleep became impossible. Every creak, every whisper, made me jump. Yet, despite the fear, I felt drawn deeper into the house's story. I needed to understand what held it prisoner, what made it restless after all these years. But the more I uncovered, the darker the truth became. And the more I feared that I might not be able to leave when it was all over. The discovery of those letters and photographs in the basement haunted me. I couldn't stop thinking about the family, their smiles frozen in time on the faded photos, and the fear written so clearly in their desperate words. Every night, I would read the letters by candlelight, piecing together their story. It was like hearing whispers from the past, voices trapped in the walls of this house. The letters spoke of strange noises in the night, shadows that moved with a mind of their own, and a feeling of being watched that never went away. The writer, who I learned was the last caretaker before me, wrote about an invisible presence growing stronger, something they called the Watcher. They begged for help, warning whoever found the letters to leave before it was too late. I realized then that the rumors I'd heard about this place were true. The previous caretaker hadn't just disappeared. Something terrible had happened. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I began exploring more of the house, searching for clues. In a locked drawer I found an old journal, its pages brittle but still legible. The journal belonged to a woman named Evelyn, the wife of the family who once lived here. Her entries started out normal, daily notes about chores, the children, and the slow pace of life in the country. But as the pages went on, her tone shifted. She wrote about hearing footsteps when no one was home, doors opening and closing by themselves, and an oppressive feeling that something dark was lurking just out of sight. The last entry chilled me to the bone. It ended abruptly, mid-sentence, as if she had been interrupted. I sat in the dim light of the living room, the journal open on my lap, wondering what had happened to Evelyn and her family. Had they run away? Had they been taken? Or worse? The house seemed to respond to my thoughts. A sudden chill filled the room, and I heard the faintest sound, like a soft sobbing coming from the hallway. I stood up, my heart pounding, and followed the sound. It led me to a door I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a heavy curtain. I pushed it open to reveal a small, forgotten room. Dust coated every surface, and in the corner stood a broken crib. The air was thick with sadness, and the scent of something sweet and decayed lingered. As I stepped inside, the sobbing stopped. Silence fell again, heavier than before. I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to the house breathe around me. The whispers came again, clearer this time, like a chorus of voices sharing secrets just beyond my understanding. I tried to catch the words, but they slipped away every time I focused. Over the next few days, I found more evidence of the family's past scattered throughout the house: old toys, a faded dress hanging in a closet, photographs torn in half. Each item seemed to carry a memory, a fragment of a life lost to time. One afternoon, while searching the attic, I found a sealed envelope hidden beneath the floorboards. Inside was a letter addressed to the next caretaker. The handwriting was shaky but urgent. It warned of a curse tied to the house, something ancient and malevolent that fed on fear and loneliness. The writer pleaded for the caretaker to keep the house's secrets safe and to never, under any circumstances, open the locked room in the basement. I hadn't noticed that the basement door was locked until now. I tried the handle, it was cold and firm. Something told me to obey the warning, but curiosity gnawed at me. That night, I lay awake debating what to do. The house seemed to pulse with energy, as if it was daring me to uncover its darkest secret. The whispers grew louder, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing at the foot of my bed, just a shadow, disappearing when I blinked. The next morning, I made my decision. I would open the basement door. I had to know the truth, no matter the cost. As I turned the key and pushed the door open, a rush of cold air spilled out, carrying the scent of earth and something far older, something forgotten. The basement was darker than the rest of the house, with walls covered in strange symbols carved into the stone. In the center of the room was a wooden box, bound in iron and sealed with an intricate lock. My hands trembled as I reached out to touch it. The house seemed to hold its breath. What I found inside changed everything I thought I knew about this place. As soon as I touched the wooden box in the basement, the atmosphere shifted. The air turned colder, heavier, as if the house itself was exhaling a long-held breath. The symbols carved into the stone walls seemed to glow faintly in the dim light of my flashlight, pulsating with a life of their own. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I forced myself to open the box, the iron lock giving way with a creak that echoed through the silent basement. Inside, I found an assortment of old objects, an ancient key, a tattered cloth, and a small bundle wrapped in faded leather. Carefully, I unwrapped the bundle and discovered what looked like a diary, its cover cracked and worn. I took the diary back upstairs, desperate to make sense of what I'd found. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting, detailing the descent of the family into madness. The writer, Evelyn's husband, spoke of voices whispering in the night, shadows that followed their every move, and an entity that fed on their fear. One passage chilled me most of all. It watches us. It waits in the darkness. The more we fear, the stronger it becomes. I don't know how much longer we can hold it back. From that moment on, the haunting intensified. Shadows stretched longer and darker. Doors slammed shut with violent force. Objects moved when I wasn't looking. I wasn't just a visitor anymore, I was a target. One night, I awoke to the sound of whispering voices filling the hallway outside my room. I got up and peeked out, but the corridor was empty, bathed in cold moonlight. The voices grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. I felt invisible hands brush my skin, cold and heavy. I stumbled back into my room and slammed the door shut. The whispers turned into a low growl, shaking the walls. Then silence. The days blurred together in a haze of fear and exhaustion. I barely slept, haunted by nightmares that felt real. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, certain something was watching me from the corner of the room. The house was alive, and angry. I tried to leave once. Packed my bags, walked to the car. But when I turned the key, the engine wouldn't start. No matter what I did, the car refused to move. I was trapped. One evening, while checking the old fireplace, I noticed something carved into the bricks, symbols matching the ones in the basement. As I traced them with my fingers, a sudden jolt of pain shot through my hand, like the house was punishing me for touching its secrets. The air grew thick with tension. I could hear footsteps pacing above me, voices whispering in languages I couldn't understand. Doors slammed open and shut on their own. Lights flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced and twisted. I found myself talking to the house, pleading with it to leave me alone. I begged it to let me go. And then came the apparitions. At first, they were just fleeting glimpses, faces in the windows, figures standing at the end of hallways. But soon, they became more real. I saw them clearly, pale faces with hollow eyes, their mouths open in silent screams. Children laughing one moment, crying the next. One night, as I sat near the fireplace, the room grew icy cold. A figure appeared before me, a woman in a faded dress, her eyes filled with sorrow. She reached out her hand, and I felt a chill seep into my soul. She whispered, barely audible, "Help us." The weight of her plea crushed me. I knew the house's secrets were tied to these spirits, trapped here by the curse. I had to find a way to free them, or risk becoming one of them. But the house wasn't done with me yet. As I write this, I can hear footsteps in the attic, pacing back and forth. The whispers have returned, louder and more urgent. Something is coming. Something I'm not ready for. The final night arrived like a storm, heavy and relentless. I could feel the house pulsing around me, alive with a dark energy that seeped into every corner. The whispers turned into screams, echoing through the halls like a chorus of lost souls begging for release. I knew I couldn't stay any longer. But leaving wasn't simple, not after everything that had happened. The house had claimed a part of me, binding me to its twisted history. That night, as I packed my few belongings, the shadows grew thick and heavy. The air turned icy cold, and the lights flickered wildly, casting grotesque shapes that danced on the walls. The walls themselves seemed to close in, tightening like a cage. Then, the door to the basement creaked open on its own. A terrible sense of dread clawed at my chest. I wanted to ignore it, to run out and never look back. But something inside me, curiosity, fear, or maybe guilt, pushed me forward. I descended the stairs into the basement one last time. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The wooden box was open, empty now, but the air was thick with something unseen, an oppressive force that made it hard to breathe. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the darkness, low and desperate. "Help us." I couldn't tell if it was real or just my mind breaking under the pressure. The voices grew louder, swirling around me like a storm, filling the room with sorrow and rage. Then I saw them, ghostly figures emerging from the shadows, their eyes hollow but pleading. The family, trapped between worlds, their souls bound to the house's curse. I reached out, wanting to help, to free them from their torment. And for a moment, the house seemed to shudder, as if the spirits were fighting to break free. Then everything went silent. When I opened my eyes, I was outside, standing in the cold night air. The house loomed behind me, quiet and still. I didn't remember leaving the basement, but somehow, I had escaped. I didn't look back. I drove away with my heart pounding, the memory of those haunted eyes burned into my mind. I never returned to the property, and I warned others to stay far away. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispers, the desperate voices calling from the darkness, begging for release. I don't know what exactly I encountered in that house, or if the curse still lingers. All I know is that some places are meant to be left alone. If you ever come across an abandoned house like that, trust your instincts. Because not everything that's abandoned is empty.